everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live from wherever you are around the world, and welcome to this session today. Now, before we start, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we live, create, and learn on today, paying respects to elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Chris Hanson, and I'm a Senior Solutions Consultant at Adobe in Sydney, Australia, and I'll be your host for today. And joining me today is artist, animator, director, AR, VR technologist, all in one. So pretty much the Tony Stark of design, really. Marc-O-Matic. Welcome, Marc.
Hi all, thanks for having me.
Mate, look, firstly, it's no surprise that you are dabbling in some really interesting tech and design. Just talk to me about what you do and just tell the audience.
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to AR and VR. So I guess I'm an augmented reality and virtual reality artist, animator, director, and technologist, with a particular focus on combining, more traditional mediums with those forms of immersive tech.
Interesting. Now, you talk about the traditional mediums with, I suppose, modern tech and things like that. Maybe just take us through what you mean by that, because it's quite illustrative what you do, and I'd like to learn maybe even like your design process, how you get started, maybe the colors, that kind of stuff. I'm really interested to hear how you start.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, more often than not, augmented reality and virtual reality, they're not new. They've been around for several years. The thing I've found quite interesting is that a lot of it, the field itself has its own type of aesthetic and feel. It's often very gamey, geometric, obviously because of the realm. And, coming from an illustrator's background, I've always wanted to combine, or at least, add my own fusion into that space. So everything I do is still, following traditional disciplines of actually illustrating everything on paper. So everything that's, sorry if I flip it around, everything that you see here is essentially, created on paper first. It's all analog. And then it gets scanned, spliced, and then transferred across into the digital space, where I then wrap it around 3D objects and models to create more of an analog, illustrative look to the work. And that allows me to create more of a fusion between the artworks I create and then bring to life through augmented reality.
That's incredible. I love the fact that you are combining traditional mediums with modern design and artwork. Do you have something to show us? Like, it'd be great to see how you would come about doing that. Starting that off and then bring it into the other areas of designing.
Yeah, for sure. So first I'll bring it up again. So the process starts off, of course, on paper. So all I use is a ballpoint pen with some ink wash. And all of it is, it's all hand illustrated. It's all drawn in a modular fashion. The reason why I do this is it kind of follows, techniques from video games in order to texture, rigid objects or environments. So everything's drawn in a modular fashion, which is then essentially converted into a texture map. So this is a scanned version of that original drawing, where it's, colored and refined a little bit. And what I really love is that
it's in Photoshop, right? And you've just colored it in Photoshop, is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So once I scan it in, it's then just imported into Photoshop, which then I turn it into a texture map. So it sort of turns into this 4K or 2K size square. The reason why it's a square is because video games require square texture maps in order to render their images efficiently. So those drawings you've seen are then placed and organized in a shape like so. And then what happens is I scan that. So I'll just actually show the other images. So a lot of my 3D models are made up of multiple images or drawings. So these are various drawings I've created. And then they essentially become my texture maps. Sorry. They become my texture maps for my 3D models. So I'll go into a bit more detail and show you if it doesn't make sense to some people. So once I have the drawing here as a texture map, I can then go into Blender. And this is something I'm actually creating for Adobe Max. I'm holding a few lab sessions there. showing people about augmented reality storytelling. So I've actually created a whole collection of assets here based off my art. So I'll just drag out my texture map like so.
So you import that texture map into Blender, and then you're able to, you go on. I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, it's totally fine. So yeah, essentially the texture maps are then used. So the images are used as texture maps. So I'll actually blow this up here. So for those who are familiar with 3D modeling or game development, I'm effectively just turning these images into maps that get unwrapped onto 3D models. So I guess I can show you an example here. Just bear with me for a second. So if I'm going to this character's, say if their character's pants, I've actually created some fabric here in the texture map, and I can essentially drag that around the image I've drawn, and that wraps itself onto these 3D models. So what I really like about this is that it kind of preserves that texture that comes from paper. And of course you can do this, on a tablet, but it's just a workflow thing. I much prefer to draw everything on paper first. I find it faster and more efficient, and then I scan it and then turn it into textures for all these models. So all these things here, I'll just go back. Oh, absolutely, all of these models here are just using 3 drawings, and they're all textured in the same fashion. So they're all just referencing those sketches I've created.
That's incredible. I'm just like looking at the little fine details, even the leaves on that building that you were just on before, things like that, the propellers. It's so detailed, and they're obviously all hand drawn first and then textured in. Oh, look at that. And then you got the animation.
Yeah. No, so it's quite a collection of objects I've created for my session at Max. But yeah, this process has kind of been experimental, and it's just sort of become the more you do it, it just becomes second nature. So I've got a process down pat, and it's quite efficient for me to draw it on paper and scan it as opposed to drawing on tablet. It's just personal preference. So yeah. So just encouraging everyone in online. Any questions for Marc, please sound them off into the chat and we'll get to them. But I got a question here. When you say wrapping, do you mean like wrapping like a present, like a paper present? Like, are they 3D models already existing, or are they? Yeah, am I explaining it right? Oh no, absolutely, no, for sure. It's that's exactly right. So what they mentioned with GIF unwrapping, that's pretty much the process behind it. So once the 3D models are created, then I can essentially unwrap the texture. So think of it, think of it like a Coke can in this example. So I've got this cylindrical shape here. And what I can do is unwrap it so that if you look at these rectangles here, this is a flat representation of that cylinder.
Got it.
And then what I can easily do is I'm just dragging it, to the designated texture that I want to use. So in my head, I'll have a segmented, almost exploded version of the character or creation I want to make, and then I'll draw it in modular pieces and then reassemble it back together again. And that's just kind of my process that I use, as opposed to where you might go into ZBrush, where you might sculpt the model and then paint it directly on there. I kind of use more of a old school approach, which is, I guess, being more commonplace with older video games. And the way in which they textured their characters and scenes.
Yeah, okay, really interesting. So just on the gaming side of things, obviously gaming is an influence for you. So in terms of, I'd love to just understand what type of games have inspired you over the years, or even influenced you. Yeah,
that's quite a mixed bag. I could probably go on for ages talking about that. Look, I mean, I grew up in the 90s, those retro style games, and even ones obviously in the early 2000s. Like I was obsessed with, BioShock, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, those retro PlayStation games that had those really jagged textures, highly detailed but jagged textures. Metal Gear Solid was a big inspiration for me. If you ever looked into how they created their textures through pixel art, and I guess doing research into the way in which they created their art and their textures kind of inspired me to combine that with the kind of art I create, the illustrative art I create. And I guess over the course of the last few years, I've been experimenting with mixing that with game engine tech and 3D models. So again, I could go on with the kind of inspiration, but video, I would say, my work is very detailed. It's very, I guess, in a way, I've always wanted to build my own worlds, my own characters, and, not just, telling linear stories, but non-linear stories where there's just so much commotion. There's stuff happening all the time, like a Where's Wally, picture book. I guess that sort of, curiosity and fascination in combination with the illustrative style that I have today, AR and VR just sort of became the perfect fit for that, because it was a combination of all those different those skills. Yeah,
awesome. So mate, look, let's address the helicopter in the room. How are you doing that? That is just ridiculous. There's no fault to it as well.
So I've been doing AR since 2016, and back around then there weren't a great deal of AR applications, where you could just develop your content without experience. So I've dabbled in Unity, Unreal Engine, Adobe Aero. There's Spark AR, Lens. So I've sort of dabbled in all kinds of AR apps for different purposes. So it was all just a process of experimentation. So this was created initially with Unity, with using their face tracking tech that's built within, in combination with Playmaker, which is a visual scripting tool which allows designers to build logic into their experiences without having a high level knowledge of programming. So this has essentially been ported into other different platforms as well. So Unity, Spark AR, you can even access it on my Instagram account as well and try it on for yourself. So have a real John Malkovich moment.
That's brilliant. I'm sure we'll add your Instagram handle at the bottom. But what I find, interesting is we don't really know what you look like, mate. It's a bit of a mystery.
Really cool. Look, so if I'll be doing my session docs, you will see my face in the sessions at Max. Come up and say hello. But usually, on online facing presentations or even videos, I kind of prefer using an AR avatar just because it's a nice way to break the ice and better explain what exactly it is I do. It's more show, don't tell when you're working with AR and VR. So this is kind of the peak of work, a peak example of what it is I do exactly. So
no, I love that. That's really cool. All right, a couple of things, a couple of questions. First of all, there was a comment in the chat from Gareth. He's saying, cool, I use alphas to add texture to my models in Nomad Sculpt. Is that different or similar to your process? And if so, how?
Was that alpha maps, like alpha textures? Sorry, is that?
Yeah, he just said, I use alphas to add texture to my models in Nomad Sculpt.
Okay. So by alpha, I just want to make sure that he's referring to, or he or she's referring to textures with transparency.
Yeah, we'll see if he comes back. But in the meantime, oh, no, that's a thumbs up. Yep, that's it.
Oh, fantastic. Great. So, and I guess this has been a contested topic. So in this example here, these days, a lot of processors, a lot of devices can actually handle a lot of high poly counts. And the thing with alpha texture maps is that it can actually be quite performance heavy because the process is having to draw that texture over other objects, and that requires a large amount of calculation to do that. So from my experience, especially working in, game dev and I guess interactive media in general, and thanks to the, increase in performances of our devices, some developers would prefer to use polygonal meshes as opposed to actual texture maps. So if I'll just show you here, just bear with me a moment. Sorry, excuse me. It's the wrong texture map. I apologize.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So if you look on the left, I actually don't use many transparency alpha maps at all, because of the amount of draw calls it uses in game development. So because we can draw more polygons on screen and it doesn't affect performance too much, and because I'm using simple materials, so I'm not using anything with bump maps or normal maps or other special features with the textures, they're just flat. I can get away with just using a standard texture map with no transparency, and sort of duplicate that several times over. And there's barely any dent to performance or size of the objects because it's just referencing one material. And I think this tree is probably about 2,500 triangles, and it runs quite smoothly. If I was to use an alpha map, the performance may stagger quite a bit depending on the size of the alpha map and I guess the resolution, whether it's a 512 map or if it's a 2K map, that might affect performance as well. But yeah, for me in game dev and in AR, I've generally leaned towards using meshes, regular texture maps as opposed to alpha maps. I hope that explains.
Yeah, interesting.
My process. Sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just got a question. So, just zoom into that tree with all those leaves. Yep. So all those leaves, they're all individual leaves, right? So so I'll just shrink that one down. So they're all individual meshes, all individual meshes. So does that mean you could potentially animate each one of those to act as if it were a real tree?
Absolutely, yeah. So you could use something called vertex animation, which doesn't require any bones, but it affects the individual vertices of each leaf. So you can run a radial or a wavy texture map into the material that sort of animates, which then affects all the different points, all these different vertices individually. So all these orange dots, I don't know if you can see here, can be affected through like a wave or a displacement map. I guess it might be a bit tricky to show you here, but yeah, effectively you can create a wavy effect with all these meshes. That's definitely possible. And that's how video games create their trees anyway. When they sway or when grass sways, usually a texture sort of run through the material, and then it creates that wavy effect because it translates a displacement of the vertice of the vertice in real time. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like just how they interact, especially with all the other elements working. So yeah, I got a bit of a question around AR and I suppose companies, right? So what type of companies do you work with, or what are those types of companies looking into or seeking your skills for?
Yeah, so I've created filters and effects for not just tech companies, but advertising agencies, educational institutions. They're all kind of after different and unique ways to sort of communicate their ideas and stories to the audiences. So I've worked with universities just to communicate really complex ideas that would otherwise be hard to translate in a video or an image. So I've created these augmented reality artworks that kind of look like engineering blueprints that you can scan, and it sort of peels the work in front of the audience where they can actually get up close and dissect it in a much more intimate way, as opposed to a video where it's just linear and you have to scrub back and forth. AR allows you to dissect and study the subject matter in a much more intimate way just by getting in there and sort of playing with it in 3D. And yeah, so I've worked with Meta, Snapchat, so with Lens Studio. These companies are looking to create interesting and exciting filters and to really push the boundaries and demonstrate what kind of experiences can be created with their tech. So right now, I mean, it's still early days, but yeah, it's really been a combination of educational, informative content, as well as promotional material, such as augmenting posters or artworks for promotional campaigns. So I've worked with a few festivals here as well, a few in Perth, a few in Sydney, activating branded artworks that sort of come alive and reveal more information about the work. So it's quite, I mean, depending on what you want to do, it's not just, a lot of people think it's just face filters. But there are companies that want to communicate their stories in more engaging ways. So, and I've presented to Samsung, I've presented to Sony. All these works I've created have their own unique style and aesthetic, which I think has had some appeal to these various companies because I haven't seen it in this kind of light before. So yeah, it's a mix of educational content, it's a mix of promotional material, and that's kind of been my space ever since, I guess. Not so much the filters. It's been probably more large scale experiential works.
I saw on your Instagram actually, your PAX Oz badge.
Yes, thank you. I should have actually brought that up. Thank you.
Incredible, man.
Bringing it up. Yeah. So recently, I mean, if you some of you guys are based in Australia, we just had the PAX Australia conference, or Expo, which is a massive video game conference here in Melbourne. And I worked with another organization here in Melbourne to work on the creative direction, the visual branding for Melbourne International Games Week. So I worked on that. I also created some augmented reality branding and merchandise. So essentially created this, I don't know if it's available anymore. So this pin here, it's not activated now, but if you look at my Instagram account, you'll see it come to life as a augmented reality effect. So you can activate anything from a poster to a piece of merch to any other 3D object. So it's quite exciting what you can apply augmented reality to.
Yeah, I got a question on that. So from that style, right? So that the pin where you can bring up the image and it recognizes it and then it animates. What type of future interactions do you see taking place from that? Because at the moment it's more visual, you can look at it, it's not too interactive, or correct me if I'm wrong, but how in the future do you see it going in terms of more interactivity?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it depends on client needs, but that pin, that piece of merchandise can be you can essentially add interactivity to it with, by touching it or by, getting close to it, adding proximity to it. At the moment, obviously augmented reality is mainly consumed via mobile devices, and what you can really do is just move around and tap on it. But as these other tech companies are developing their own AR eyewear, I think it'll become much more natural in the coming years, because we'll be using our hands, we'll be using other forms of haptics to engage with the AR content. An example would be, Snapchat has their own spectacles, their own AR glasses, which you can try on. And I think you can purchase them, but they're available to creators as well. But there have been AR creators that have been creating, these amazing artworks and experiences that, you don't just touch it, but you're encouraged to walk around and move around the works, and they react according to what you do in that physical space. So, it's evolving over time. I think as AR glasses, become much more widely available, I think the way in which we engage with this content will evolve as well. So I think it's still very early days. But the experiences I create, they can be interactive. Some are just linear stories, but you can add, touch features and other interactive features to the work as well. Again, depends on the experience that you're creating.
Yeah, I think Ray-Ban have got their own coming out, or, I mean, there's even in the talks of Apple releasing AR glasses.
Absolutely. So they're all, I think even Samsung are developing their own too. So all these companies, they're all building their own, it's like that, the revolution of the iPhone, when no one had an iPhone and now everyone has one. I think we're getting to that point where eventually everyone will, well, not everyone, but a majority of people will start experiencing the world through AR, which I'm not sure what to think of it, but yeah, I guess that's kind of where we're leaning towards, where we're headed. So,
well, it means more business for you, mate. So that's good.
We'll see.
A couple of questions. This could be quite a simple question, but what you showed earlier, this is from Johanna. How long might a piece like that take to create, and how do you keep yourself from getting bogged down into too much of the detail?
That's a great question. So bogged into the detail in terms, like quite literally, like the amount of physical detail that's in the work.
Yeah, I would say the physical detail, even creating the environments. Where would you know when to stop?
That's a really good question, and to be honest, sometimes I get carried away, and I just, there are times where I have to strip back. I guess I like the saying of working modular, not harder. So these textures you have here, I repurpose them into other assets and creations as well. So they're not just for specific objects. I can reuse them several times over, which kind of speeds up my process. So that's kind of my mindset. It's always, it's kind of like an artist, a painter with their set colors that they've prepared for the big artwork. This is kind of how I work, where I create these grand scale modular textures that kind of become my library of art, which I can then sort of reuse and recycle and repurpose over and over again to create new forms of art. So it's not really reinventing the wheel every time. I can always come back to a texture map and use it for several other objects. And I think there's, I don't see anything wrong with that, because of course it's my own arsenal of artwork, and it's really just repurposing it to turn it into something new. So for example, I mean, some textures in this character here, on the little cloak, you might see some textures reapplied. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry, I just changed my screen, sorry.
That's all right.
Let me go back here. Juggling several screens. So here, for example, so this little character here with the birds, so they're using a texture map. If you look at the cloak, some of the patterns that you see are repurposed onto other models as well. So this birdie here is also referencing similar textures. And again, it's like my own palette. It's like my own brush, where I can just reuse certain sketches again and again in different parts. So that's how I don't get bogged down. I like to think in a modular way and ensure that I'm reusing works. And it's great too, because I can be consistent. It means I can be visually consistent across all my creations, because they're kind of referencing the same kind of color palettes, the same kind of textures, the same kind of line work. So
it's almost reminiscent of like a steampunk kind of style and feel. Is that the I suppose the style and the creations you're going for, or where did you get that concept from?
Look, to be honest, I mean, I guess that kind of line work, I've been doing since I was a kid. I didn't really discover steampunk until much later, but I've always been fascinated with machines and just large scale scenes. I guess I kind of just fell into that category of being steampunk, just because of my fascination for machinery, for technical scenery like that. But I guess it's kind of been inspired by again, the video games I play, some of the films I grew up as a kid watching. I mean, Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle, Miyazaki's works, I think they're iconic too, and they're praised by a lot of artists and inspirational for a lot of artists. And I won't lie, I think some of that has sort of bled into the kind of aesthetic that I have today as well. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't even know what to call it, because I guess even I've shown some of my work in steampunk communities, and they say, you know, there's no gears. Where are the gears? Where's the steam? Where's the clockwork stuff? It's like, you know, where do I fit in? It's just kind of, you know, a style I've created on my own. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
I love that. It's your own style. It's the Marc-O-Matic style.
Yeah, and I've been really lucky, you know, I'm really lucky and privileged to continue creating experiences, you know, with my aesthetic. Like even my head, I'll just get up closer. It's all illustrated textures that I've made on paper, the same process. And I get to, you know, wear that, and it just becomes sort of a recognizable, you know, style. So I'm really lucky and grateful that, you know, although the AR space is very competitive now, that, you know, there are clients that want to work with this particular visual style that I've made. So I'm really, really grateful on that end. Yeah. So
let's talk about that AR head. Is there some sort of character that lives in that AR head? Is there a family? Like there's buildings there's windows, there's trams, you know, the trees are moving.
Yeah, well, there's even trays and trams. So if anyone has, so, you know, being from the city of Melbourne in Australia, for those who live here, would be familiar with the kinds of elements in here. So there's, you know, trams that we sort of ride. There are also trains that go underground. So this is really it has a personal story to it. So it's really, you know, the sum of my part. It's sort of a sorry, I'm trying to use my words here. A story of, I guess, my life journey so far. So it's really been, even the back has other buildings too, but it's sort of a combination of all the buildings and scenes and environments, you know, that I've grown up in, and it's kind of an amalgamation of that. So, you know, moving to Melbourne, being here for a good, you know, almost 10 to 15 years or so, growing to love the city and, you know, appreciate everything around it. That's kind of, you know, all these experiences I've built up. It's kind of a sum of all these things. So that's kind of a representation of my life so far. And, you know, as I continue to work, you know, over the years, I'll start adding more elements to it as well. So the mask itself will evolve into different things based on life experiences. And
I love that. I was about to ask you, do you either have multiple different AR heads, or will you add to the existing one?
That's a really good question. And a lot of people have been asking if I would do a yearly change, so evolve masks over time. I think could be cool, because, you know what, you know, Apple's logo has evolved over the years, and I know it could be a cool thing to explore. But yeah, I'd love to explore different things. I wanted to actually do different cities or explore different, you know, environments, to do maybe a futuristic head or a medieval head, or, you know, I guess that could be on the cards. Maybe something to do each year. That'd be really exciting.
All right, I got a couple of questions here. Johanna again. AR, VR seems to be popping up everywhere. But is there a particular industry that you really want to bring it to, that hasn't really adopted it yet? Yeah,
that's a really good question.
Because I feel personally, I've seen AR in like the retail industry, obviously it's in the tech industry. Are there any other types of industries that perhaps haven't addressed it yet that you think could benefit from it?
That's a great question. I mean, it's obviously in education, but not in the format I imagine it to be. I feel like I think those that are applying AR into the educational industry, or the educational sector rather, it still feels kind of jilted and disconnected to the physical content, which I think, you know, kids would really love if they saw an actual bridge between physical and digital when they experience their content. It still feels very, in my words, PowerPoint AR, where it's kind of corporate and janky and clunky. It doesn't quite connect with the curriculum. I mean, look, I've been working on this picture book for some time, where some of my artworks come and peel out of the canvas or peel out of the page. So I'd love to take that to the next level and publish that and show the world how it could be done when you embrace, you know, the actual physical content that the kids are given. So yeah, I mean, imagine Grug. I don't know if people read Grug anymore, or
Grug, yeah.
Imagine a Where's Wally picture book that sort of springs to life with all these characters and things happening all at once. But it actually is bridged, like it's digitally and physically bridged together. It actually feels like there's a connection between the works. I think stuff like that I'd love to explore more.
That'd be amazing. Imagine a Where's Wally picture book in augmented reality and trying to search for him. I could just see it now.
and don't get me wrong as well. I mean, I think markerless AR experiences, ones that don't require an image or an artwork to activate, that's obviously fine too. But I've noticed that there's something quite unique about connecting a physical item, a physical piece of art with an AR. With an AR activation, there's something kind of magical and mystical about it, almost like an artifact that has its own special secret story behind it, which I think would resonate quite well with kids, because there is that magic between not being there and sort of appearing right in front of you. So I'd love to explore that space even more and sort of try and advocate and show more engaging ways and interesting ways to create AR content in that space with physical items.
And just as you were saying that, I just remember growing up reading a book, very visual book called Animalia. And I don't know if you recall it, but there was all these incredible illustrations of animals. I think it was throughout the alphabet, but there was always a little boy, and he was always hidden, and you had to kind of find him in each scene. Just visualizing that, it'd be great to see something like that come to life.
That'd be amazing, and I get that reference quite a bit. It's that'd be a really exciting area to explore, to open a book and reveal these worlds and sort of explore them. That'd be quite magical, especially for younger people, I reckon.
Yeah. So just in what you've got on screen now, how would you get that into an augmented reality environment? I believe you've got like an iPad set up, perhaps ready to go, but I mean, just looking at it now.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to show you. So I'll just show you the process again, and whilst including the app I'll be using for Adobe Max, which is Adobe Aero. So again, once it's all textured, it's then applied to the 3D models, and then I import them into. So I actually export all these 3D assets you see into Adobe Aero. So Adobe Aero is part of the Creative Cloud. It's currently in beta right now. So, lots of feedback is greatly appreciated, because we're constantly adding new features every now and then. So I'll be doing a few sessions with Adobe Aero based on those assets. So I've provided a whole collection of assets for everyone to try out and to build their own 3D environments. But essentially, they get, for those who who are familiar with 3D, these are all exported out as, in my process, they're exported out as FBX files. So FBX files are kind of the standard 3D formats for video games. There's also GLTF files as well, which is, I would say it's probably more web focused at the moment. But yeah, FBX or GLTF files, was it GTLF? Sorry, I think I got mixed up. I think it's GTLF. Sorry.
You're doing a Google, aren't you?
I am, yeah, sorry. How embarrassing. Oh yeah, it's GLTF. Yeah, sorry, I got them mixed up. Yeah. Yes, but essentially these get exported out. So for example, this character here, sorry, wrong one. Here we go. So these characters here get exported out as FBX files. So for example, I'll export them out here through Blender. So I use Blender to export my work out. And then I import them into Adobe Aero, which is here. So it accepts FBX files, OBJs, and GLTF files. And it also allows me to import animations as well. So another cool thing is I can also add interactivity, simple interactivity and logic into my scenes too. So I'll just test this out like so. So all those parts combined allows me to build these modular, villages, which are also interactive. So if you can see my cursor, I might click on those various characters and they all perform little actions. So we've got this gardener here I'm tapping on who waters the plants.
So I've got a question. So the animation that we are seeing right now, is that created by you in Blender?
That's correct, yes. So all these assets and animations were created using Blender. And excuse me. They were all created in Blender and exported out. So if you look down here, I've exported all these different animation tracks. So what's really cool is you can export animation clips with your assets and you can actually access them within Adobe Aero. So for example, if I come over here, So if I come over here and if I try to find the birds, there's a lot of things here. I can essentially access it through the behavior builder in Adobe Aero. Yeah. So I can trigger its animation based on a number of things, whether I want to tap on it or if I want to get within a certain range, I can then activate an animation and play some sound as well.
Yeah, so the range one, that's a proximity one, right? So if I've got it placed in a particular area, if I come close to that bird, it'll just automatically animate.
That's exactly right. So at the moment, Adobe Aero has about 4 different triggers you can use. So there's a start trigger, which means that the action will. So what I mean by action, an action is anything that is applied to an object that causes it to perform a function in any kind of way. So that might be an animation, or it might be a basic movement, or any other form of logic. So you can get it to, you can get it to start as soon as the AI experience starts. You can tap on it. You can also use proximity, enter, and exit triggers. So that means if I enter a certain range, if I'm within a certain range of that particular object or character, it will start playing that animation or action, which is quite great. If you want to build your own world where, if you want to wave to a particular character or interact with a particular character, tapping is great, but to have yourself, present and your presence actually affecting, the behavior of the character, I think that's quite exciting. So I can even show you a demo too, if you'd like.
Please. I'm not going to say no to that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, for sure. So right now, this is this is my project called Solar Skylines, and I will be presenting this at Adobe Max and showing people how to work and move and interact with these objects in Aero.
By the way, can I just say, you mentioned earlier from influence gaming, BioShock was one of those. This is very BioShock. I think Infinite. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. I think the whole series has been a big inspiration to me. So I absolutely love it. I'm also a big emerging fan of Solarpunk as well. I think it's quite a beautiful genre. It kind of does away with all those dystopian themes that we're kind of familiar with today, and it's kind of uplifting and positive. So this is kind of inspired by that Solarpunk genre of sort of putting my own spin on it too. So as you can see here,
just before you go on, just talk to me a little bit about Solarpunk. What exactly is it? And
so you guys might be familiar with all the other forms of punk, like cyberpunk, diesel punk, steampunk, which are in a way kind of dystopian views of the future. So very dark, miserable, dank, polluted, especially if you're looking at steampunk. Solarpunk is kind of more of a positive outlook on that, where future technologies are sort of built around solar energy, clean energy, wind energy, lots of greenery, and it's really focused on environmentally friendly forms of technology which sort of benefit the world rather than destroy it. And so this is kind of inspired by that particular genre, which I have been exploring for some time in my works now. So I've created these objects such as these solar sunflowers, which open up to generate energy. They're all powered by wind turbines, and just sort of cleaner variants of of energy. So
just as you're doing that, just a reminder, any more questions in the chat, please feel free to ask them. There's about 8 or so minutes to go.
So what I'll do is I'm going to show you the iPad version.
Yeah.
If I can just boot that up. Sorry, I'll just maybe go back to this real quick while we do that.
Mm-hmm. Just as you're doing that, just during COVID, how did you get inspiration? I mean, COVID affected a lot of people. In terms of you, did you produce more work? Did you have moments of lull, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I think it affected a lot of industries in different ways. I mean, for me, I was due to travel quite a bit to showcase my work internationally, and unfortunately, that just that fell through. Everything kind of all the borders shut, so I was kind of left to find different ways to, I guess, find different avenues to continue working. And I stumbled across crypto art and metaverse spaces and saw that as an opportunity to turn my artworks into actual experiential worlds that audiences could visit. So I've been doing a lot of commercial work with building worlds in VR chat. So for those who aren't familiar, VR chat it's like a virtual reality app where you can explore all these kinds of worlds and hang out with people as different avatars. So I was really busy building my own environments, building my own characters, and kind of monetizing those experiences through collectors and for those who wanted art or those kinds of things. So I was really lucky. I mean, I've been working from home. I've been working from home regardless, before the pandemic. So I was kind of lucky in that sense that I could just create anywhere as a digital nomad. But it was really just a matter of pivoting, all my work, all my experience into a different field altogether. So I was really lucky to be, working quite busy during that time. I will just boot up the iPad right now for you.
Oh, look at this. This is live.
So this is Adobe Aero and on the iPad. So what you can do with Adobe Aero, it's available on both your computer and your iPad on your mobile device. So I think it's for iOS and Android. Mm-hmm. So I'm currently testing this on my iPad. The really cool thing is any changes or edits I do on the computer, on the desktop version, will be applied and synchronized across Creative Cloud, where you can then continue to edit it on the iPad. So what I'm doing is I'm just setting an anchor point. And what you just saw on the desktop, so again, all this you saw on the desktop is now shown on the iPad. So I'm going to hit preview.
And animates.
And everything that I've just built there is interactive. So I'm getting up close to this bird. I'm tapping on it now, and it's tweeting. I can also float around this whole environment in augmented reality. I'm tapping on this little kiter here. As if I get close to these birds, they'll start flying up. So again, that's the proximity trigger that I've used.
Wow.
So if I'm, say, 30 centimeters away from this bird, it'll then start flying up, and then I programmed it so that it flies back down again.
When you go away from it.
So if I go away, it resets the trigger. If I come back,
it goes up. Oh my gosh!
So this is really cool. I mean, this is great for those who are kind of new to AR and don't have a lot of programming experience. What's really cool is that you can build your own simple logic and functionality within Aero, with tap triggers, proximity triggers to get your scenes reacting to audience movement. So I've just tapped on those characters there, and they've just waved back at me just in the distance there. There's an airship. So if I tap on the airship, it starts flying around, so I can get that to orbit around a particular environment. And yeah, so it's simple triggers. using simple triggers to bring the world to life. So the thing with AR is, while it is awesome to showcase arts, in our 3D space, a lot of the time it can feel lifeless and static, and that's why I think animation, sound, and interactivity can really, add more vibrance to the scene and immersion.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just we've got a couple of minutes just to go, Marc-O-Matic. I've got a question. How would you encourage people to get involved with augmented reality and even like traditional designers, how would people start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I would say if you already play video games, if you play games also, that may also be 3D, you've already started because you've already become familiar working and playing in a 3D environment. For designers who are new to 3D, I highly encourage those to start learning, 3D software. So a really popular software I use is Blender 3D. And there are a bunch of tutorials online where you can get started to build your own, to create and sculpt your own objects. So I guess the main important thing, working in AR, because you're working with depth and dimension, it's important to learn how to navigate in that environment. So learning the fundamentals of 3D are quite important, like learning to work within an X, Y, and Z axis when moving objects. Like for example here, and it's quite easy to pick up. It just comes to practice and being familiar working in a 3D environment. So working in AR, it requires you to understand working in X, Y, Z, how to manipulate things with different coordinates. So I would encourage people to explore Blender to create your own 3D models. If you've got access to Creative Cloud, try importing them into Adobe Aero. So there's lots of documentation online where you can start learning. I also have a tutorial series based off this, which is available on HelpX. So there's a whole series, I think it's a 5-part series where I show people how to play with these objects and create their own AR experiences. And it takes you through the steps on learning how to move objects in 3D and AR as well. So I highly encourage you to look up Solar Skylines or even MarcOMatic on HelpX, and hopefully you'll find the tutorial series there.
Yeah, so that's like helpx.adobe.com, and then you could do a search inside of that.
That's correct. Exactly right. Yeah. And it goes through, I think, as a 5-part series, I go through, basic navigation, working in 3D, and then testing it out on your mobile device. So yeah, trying to get beginners to become familiar and comfortable working in a 3D environment.
No, I love that. And mate, we're about at time right now. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you want to find Marc-O-Matic on the socials, Instagram is probably the best place to find him. He does some incredible stuff. You can see him upload some content, but also Adobe Max sessions. Adobe Max is a hybrid event this year. You should definitely tune into some of his sessions virtually. Definitely look into it. Marco, thanks so much for your time, mate.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks all. Bye-bye.